Hello and welcome to another session from LearnITCoursesOnline.com. My name is Bashir Fadal and I'd like to welcome you to this session. In this session, we continue our journey into the career of a business analyst. As a business analyst is building their requirements, there's some terminologies that we hear about the users, which is use cases and sometimes user stories. So due to different permissions that each user has, or due to the processes and steps involved in the system use or the software use, it's important to analyze and pinpoint what the user story is and what the use cases are. For example, if we have two employees in a bank and we're building a software for a bank where people are depositing, or one of the features is depositing money into an account, then we have a normal person that works in the bank that you will go in and deposit your money with and withdraw money from, your bank teller. Now, as a user, quote unquote, bank teller, that bank teller is allowed, if you wanted to cash up to $3,000, to cash it. So the software is going to allow them that when you have up to $3,000 that you're trying to cash through a check or withdrawal form, that they can give you $3,000. However, if they were to give you more than $3,000, now we would need to bring in a manager, which is a different kind of a user. And that user has different privileges. So as we talk about use cases, remember that it's related back to the user and the different privileges that users have. And also user stories have to do with the different routes a user would take. For instance, if I was to go to a website online to buy a ticket as a user, there's different paths that I can take. So one way that we'll be designing the website is if I'm taking a round trip. I'm taking a round trip from New York to LA, and then from LA back to New York. So in that case, when I go to the website, I'm going to book where I'm leaving from, the destination that I'm going to. And because I did check that it's a round trip, then I have the option, or I have to also book a flight from my destination back to my original route. Nonetheless, if I was to check one way, then yes, I would have the first line of options, which is where I'm leaving from and my destination. But then the software will not, or the website or the web portal will not display the second piece to me. So it's a slightly different journey. So the first question we're going to deal with is, what is a use case? A use case describes a sequence of actions performed by a system that provides value to an actor. The use case describes the system's behavior under various conditions as it responds to a request from one of the stakeholders called the primary actor. The actor is the who of the system, in other words, the end user. In software and system engineering, a use case is a list of steps typically defining interactions between a role, known in a UML as an actor, and a system to achieve a goal. The actor can be a human or external system. A use case specifies the flow of events in the system. It is more concerned with what is performed by the system in order to perform the sequence of actions. So what are the benefits of a use case? A use case provides the following benefits. Number one, it's an easy means of capturing the functional requirements with a focus on value added to the user. Number two, use cases are relatively easy to write and read compared to the traditional requirement methods. Number three, use cases force developers to think from the end user perspective. Number four, use case engage the user in the requirement process. So now we're going to dissect and look at the anatomy of a use case. Name. Descriptive name that illustrates the purpose of the use case. Description. It describes what the use case does in a couple of sentences. Actor. This lists any actors that participate in the use case. Precondition, conditions that must be met prior to starting the use case. Flow of events. It's a description of interaction between the system and the actor. Postcondition describes the state of the system after a use case has run its course. So now let's together look at a use case template to simplify it. Here we have shown a sample template of a use case which a business analyst can fill so that the information can be useful for the technical team to ascertain information about the project. Starting with guidance for a use case template. Make sure to document each use case using the template given in the end, because this provides a description of each section in the use case template. Next, the use case identification. Use case ID. This gives each use case a unique numeric identifier in hierarchical form. Related use cases can be grouped into hierarchy. Functional requirements can be tracked back to a labeled use case. So one of the things we want to assign is the use case name. State a concise, result-oriented name for each use case. These reflect that tasks the user needs to be able to accomplish using the system. Include an action, verb, and a noun. Some examples could be view part number information, and then manually mark hypertext source and establish link to target. Place an order for a CD with the updated software version. The next area is the use case history. Here, we mentioned about the names of the people who are the stakeholders of the use case document. Next item, created by. Supply the name of the person who initially documented the use case. Next, date created. Enter the date in which the use case was initially documented. Last updated by. Supply the name of the person who performed the most recent update to the use case description. And finally, date last updated. Enter the date on which the use case was most recently updated. So now we're going to dig a little deeper into use case definition. The following are definitions of the key concepts of use case. Number one, actor. An actor is a person or other entity external to the software system being specified who interacts with the system and performs use case to accomplish tasks. As such, different actors often correspond to different user classes or roles identified from the customer community that will use the product. So let's name the actor that will be performing this use case. Next, description. Here we provide a brief description of the reason for and outcome of this use case, or a high-level description of the sequence of actions and the outcome of existing or executing the use case. Preconditions. List any activities that must take place or any conditions that must be true before the use case can be started. Number each precondition. For example, number one, user identity has been authenticated. Then user's computer has sufficient free memory available to launch tasks. Then post conditions describe the state of the system at the conclusion of the use case execution. Number each post condition. So let's review a quick example here. Number one, document contains only valid HTML tags. Price of item in database has been updated with new value. Now let's move to the next use case definition, which is priority. Indicate the relative priority of implementing the functionality required to allow the use case to be executed. Next, frequency of use. Estimate the number of times this use case will be performed by the actors for some appropriate unit of time. Next, normal course of events. Provide a detailed description of the user actions and system responses that will take place during execution of the use case under normal expected conditions. Next, alternative courses. Document other legitimate usage scenarios that can take place within the use case separately in the section. Next, exceptions. Describe any anticipated error conditions that could occur during execution of the use case and define how the system is to respond to those conditions. Next, includes. List any other use case that are included by this use case. Common functionality that appears in multiple use cases can be split out into a separate use case that is included by the ones that need that common functionality. Special requirements. Identify any additional requirements, such as non-functional requirements for the use case that may need to be addressed during the design or implementation. These may include performance requirements or other quality attributes. Assumptions. List any assumptions that were made in the analysis that led to accepting this use case into the product description and writing the use case description. Next, notes and issues. List any additional comments about this use case or any remaining open issues or TBDs, that is to be determined, that must be resolved. Identify who will resolve each issue, the due date, and when the resolution ultimately is. Finally, change management and version control. Version control is the management of changes to document large websites and other collections of information. Changes are usually identified by number or letter code, termed as revision number or revision level. Each revision is associated with a timestamp and a person making the change. In the next few slides, we're going to cover examples to detail this. But as we're doing it, as you're using any software or web portal to purchase something, for example, or any software that you're using within your computer to accomplish something, you can always look at the use case and how it was designed, at least mentally. For instance, there's a website online that I'd like to buy a ticket with. How would I build that website? If I go online to a lot of the traditional websites, then you can kind of look at how would you describe that process? What are some of the preconditions? What are some of the exceptions? What are some of the assumptions? It assumes that I have a credit card so that I can purchase with it. There are some exceptions. For instance, I can purchase a ticket, but most websites or most airlines do not allow you to book a ticket a year in advance from today. So if today is January 1st, 2022, then I cannot book a flight past January 1st, 2023. And you can literally go on the calendar and try to book a year ahead, and you'll find that that date is blocked and everything after that. Or I cannot book anything in the past. So if today's January 1st, 2022, I cannot book on December 31st, 2021. So as you're looking at it, you're going to see certain things, and then frequency of use. Most people would book round trips. Some people would book one way. Very little people or very few people might book multi-destination, and that is where I fly from New York to LA, but not return from LA to New York, but rather from LA to Miami, Florida. So those are all kind of things as you're building, and you're building those concepts, and we're going to look at it in the next few slides. You can kind of see how it interacts with your day-to-day software and websites and interactions with any application that's out there. So now let's look at a use case diagram. An important part of the Unified Model Language, UML, Unified Modeling Language, is the facilities for drawing use case diagrams. Use cases are used during the analysis phase of a project to identify the partition system functionality. They separate the system into actors and use cases. Actors represent the roles that can or are played by users of the system. Those users can be humans, other computers, pieces of hardware, or even other software systems. The only criteria is that they must be external to the part of the system being partitioned into the use case. They must supply stimuli to that part of the system, and they must receive outputs from it. Use cases represent the activities that actors perform with the help of your system in the pursuit of a goal. We need to define what those users, quote unquote, actors, need from the system. Use case should reflect user needs and goals and should be initiated by an actor. Business, actors, customer participating in the business use case should be connected to the use case by association. Drawing the use case diagrams. As we can see in the image, what a use case might look like using UML schematic form. The use case itself looks like an oval. The actors are drawn as little stick figures. The actors are connected to the use case with lines. Now, earlier we said that those users can be humans, other computers, pieces of hardware, or even other software systems. Just to elaborate with the example that we had earlier, which is of purchasing a ticket online. Now, the person that plays or the user that places that interaction, that's putting their credit card information to buy it, might be us. We are the people that are entering the credit card information and click buy. But then the actual execution of withdrawing money from our account, it's not a person. It's once you hit buy, it's going into a system with MasterCard or Visa Online or PayPal or whatever that interface is to purchase it. So that's an example of a user entering the credit card information, and in this case, a system or an external system or software or an application that's executing that piece of it. And that is what meant by those users can be humans, other computers, pieces of hardware, or even other software systems. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Use case number 1, sales clerk check out an item. Customer sets item on counter, uses, swipe UPC reader, system looks up UPC code in database, procuring item description and price, system emits audible beep, system announces item description and price over voice output, system adds price and item type to current invoice, system adds price to correct tax subtotal. So the user's relationship is very much like a function call or a subroutine. The use case being used in this fashion is called an abstract use case because it cannot exist on its own, but must be used by other use cases. Let's have fun with another example. And in this example, we're looking at the withdrawal use case. The goal of a customer in relation to our money vending machine, ATM, is to withdraw money. So we are adding withdrawal use case. Withdrawing money from the vending machine might involve a bank for the transactions to be made. So we're also adding another actor, in this case, bank. Both actors participating in the use case should be connected to the use case by association. So the money vending machine provides withdrawal use case for the customer and bank actors. The customer actor and the bank actor. Relationships between actors and use cases. Use cases could be organized using different kind of relationships, generally known as generalization, association, extend, and include. And now as you're looking more and more into different use cases, you start to imagine pretty much all of your interfaces and all of your interactions with different softwares, applications, whether you're at the ATM machine withdrawing money, or you're in a web portal purchasing something, how those use cases interact. And now we're going to elaborate a little bit more into those relationships of generalization, association, extend, and include. So let's start with generalization between use cases. There may be instances where actors are associated with similar use cases. In such a case, a child use case inherits the properties and behavior of the parent use. Hence, we need to generalize the actor to show the inheritance of functions. They are represented by a solid line with a large hollow triangle arrowhead. So now let's look at association between use cases. Associations between actors and use cases are indicated in use case diagrams by solid lines. An association exists whether an actor is involved with an interaction described by use case. Number 1, extend. There are some functions that are triggered optionally. In such cases, the extend relationship is used and the extension rule is attached to it. Things to remember is that the base use case should be able to perform a function on its own, even if the extending use case is not called. Extend relationship is shown as a dashed line with an open arrowhead directed from the extending use case to the extended base use case. The arrow is labeled with the keyword extend. Number 2, include. It is used to extract use case fragments that are duplicated in the multiple use cases. It is also used to simplify large use case by splitting it into several use cases and to extract common parts of the behaviors of two or more use cases. Include relationships between use cases, which is shown by a dashed arrow with an open arrowhead from the base use case to the included use case. The arrow is labeled with the keyword include. Remember that use cases deal only in the functional requirements for a system. Other requirements such as business rules, quality of service requirements, and implementation constraints must be represented separately. And as we can see in this diagram, there's an example of a simple use case diagram with all the elements marked. So let's conclude this section with basic principles for successful application of use cases. Remember to always keep it simple by telling stories. Be productive without perfection. Understand the big picture. Identify reuse opportunity for use cases. Focus on value. Build the system in slices. Deliver the system in increments. Adapt to meet the team's needs. Thank you for joining us in our journey as the career of the business analyst as we discuss use cases. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session.